Coming up on this episode, the latest on Jonathan Kuminga and what his next contract at the Warriors may look like. Golden State set to take a huge risk on young center Quinten Post next season, and a very close rival in the market to steal Cavon Looney. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good week. It's just gone 8 a.m. Friday morning, my time here in Australia, so bright and early. I'm not the greatest starter in the world, so you'll have to bear with me, and I'm still dealing with this cold a little bit, but I thought I'd jump on and just discuss a little bit of the latest news and rumors surrounding the Warriors at the moment. Before we get into that, obviously we had Game 3 of the NBA Finals yesterday with the Indiana Pacers taking a 2-1 lead in the series. It's starting to make my pre-series and a lot of people's pre-series predictions look pretty laughable. Obviously, I picked Thunder in 5, as a lot of people did, and really gave the Pacers not much of a chance in this series, and fair credit to them. They have been amazing in 2 of the first 3 games. Now, obviously, not so much in Game 2, but a huge win for them yesterday. One I really thought they, as much as it was only 1-1, obviously, I just felt like the Pacers really needed to win that game in the fourth quarter, and they were able to pull it out. I think there's a couple of things that I've seen here through the first 3 games that I probably could have envisaged, but didn't, I suppose, look into enough going into my pre-series prediction. I think probably the main thing is some of the clutch stuff here, where the Pacers seem to be far more in control in these latter stages of games. And I feel like we saw it again in the fourth quarter yesterday. The Thunder scored 15, 17 points or something like that in the fourth quarter, where when they really get bogged down, when they get into tight situations, it's inevitably Shea ISOs and deep mid-range jump shots, and it's kind of predictable. We know what's going to happen, and it's not great. It generally, their looks aren't great in the tight moments, clutch situations. What I really love about the Pacers and the way they play is that it never really gets to that point. Like, you might see the odd isolation possession like Hallie, or, if you go back to the Game 1, Andrew Nembhard step back 3, which is just wild. Like, there's the odd one, but I think they can just generally create much better and open looks than what the Thunder can in tight situations. And they don't generally go away from their offense, which is pretty similar to the Warriors in terms of its high ball movement style. Like, they kick the ball around, and it's great to watch. And I think that's why a lot of us have fallen in love with the Pacers and the way they play. And I generally think they, in the biggest moments, can still create open corner, open wing threes in a way that I don't think the Thunder generally do, because they are so Shea conscious. And I just think there's a little bit more versatility, a few more wrinkles to the Pacer offense. Even in the fourth quarters, there's these Halliburton, Miles Turner pick and rolls, but then Turner kind of, he'll get the pocket feed and then he'll pull up around the mid-range area for a mid-range jump shot, which is generally pretty effective. And even something like that, are the Thunder doing that with Chet Holmgren? How many times is Chet coming up and setting a screen for Shea, and Shea's hitting him on a pocket pass to the rim or a pick and pop? Chet's not really getting involved, and I think part of that is because it's so Shea conscious. Shea's going to take 20 to 25 shots, and it's just becoming a little bit predictable, particularly in the biggest moments. So I think Indiana's, it's really funny. There was a meme, I think, that an Australian person posted after the Game 1. Obviously, Indiana won in sensational fashion, talking about the comparisons between Indiana in the clutch situations and my team, Collingwood, in the AFL, whose jumper I'm wearing right now, in 2023, where we just won, and we still do in 2025. We won a game on Monday by a point. But we just always win the close games, and we always make the right decisions and avoid big mistakes in the big moments. And someone said that they get a feeling of Indiana about that Collingwood team in 2023. Completely different sports, I know, but as a Collingwood fan, I was like, yeah, I get that. I absolutely get that, because these teams, they just have a confidence about them. They just exude confidence in the biggest moments, and they don't shy away from it. And I think that confidence, in fairness, stems around the whole series and around the entire games as well, because I said to a few people after Game 1, when Indiana came back and won that game, I said, I still think, and I still think after game 3 that there's probably still a wide gap between these two teams, I think, but I don't think the teams carry themselves like that. So I can look at OKC, and I think a lot of what I said pre-series is still very much true in terms of they've got the best player. I think they've got the best starting 5. I think they've probably got the best 2 bench players that I would take. I think they should have more versatility in terms of the way they can win because they've got wings, they've got the superstar guard, they've got a couple of bigs. Like they are an incredibly good team, right? And we've seen they won 68 games in the regular season or whatever it was, 64, whatever. Like they are a very, very good team. But I don't think and maybe this is because they're young and they're yet to win a championship, I don't think they carry themselves like, oh, we are so much better than Indiana. I don't think they do that. And at the same time, I think Indiana are a worse team than OKC. And I think all of us externally believe that they are the underdogs in this series, that, it'd be a cute story if they could win a couple of games and whatever else and make this thing tight. But I think they look at themselves like, no, like we're the better team. We're the better team, or at least we can definitely win this series. And so the gap between the two teams that I think is there, those two teams don't, like, it's a lot closer in the way I think the teams view themselves. I don't think the Thunder necessarily carry themselves with the confidence that they should, and the confidence of a team that I think is significantly better than the Pacers. And I don't think the Pacers carry themselves, as if they're a huge underdog in this series by any means, which the betting odds and a lot of the external analysts and neutral fans and whatever else would suggest. So it's really fascinating. For what it's worth, I still think the Thunder will win just because, again, I have that prevailing thought that they are the better team. And I actually think they'll probably come out and win game 4, maybe win game 5, go up 3-2. But again, like I said, they'd win in 5 pre-series, and now they're down 2-1, and that Thunder in 5 is already out the door. So who knows what will happen from here? Again, as a neutral fan, I'm just hoping it goes at least. You'd expect it to go 6 at least at this point, and hopefully we get a really, really good game 7. Anyway, let's move on to the latest Warrior news here, starting with, of course, Jonathan Kuminga. That's going to be the biggest talking point here over the coming weeks, but it sounds like all signs continue to point to JK remaining with the Warriors. So everything I'm going to talk about here is basically from the latest Warriors Plus Minus podcast, where Anthony Slater of The Athletic and Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard talked about a few different topics. Clearly, JK was one of those. But the really interesting point here, because I think we've kind of worked out here over the last couple of weeks that there is a strong chance that JK stays simply because of the complications of the CBA and the sign and trade scenarios, and the Warriors only being able to take back 50% of salary, blah, blah, blah. I've talked about it repeatedly over recent podcast episodes. The most interesting thing to me here from Slater and Kawakami were the contract details that we could see here for JK. Now, I think I was under the assumption, okay, it'll be like 4 years, 100, 4 years, 110, something like that. But they actually talked about a shorter length of contract. And this is a direct quote from Slater, who said, I know the Jalen Green contract's been bounced around as at least part of the structure. Now that's like, I think it started around 30 and it's 3 years and it's a player option on the 3rd year. So talking about a shorter term deal where it's 2 guaranteed years and then a 3rd year player option. So for reference, Jalen Green, of course, fellow former lottery pick, 2021 lottery pick, went number 2 overall. Kaminga obviously went number 7. They were also teammates at G League Ignite as well before their draft year. And so Jalen Green's on a 3-year, $105.5 million deal that he obviously signed as an extension with the Rockets in October. So that's a 2-year guarantee and then a $36 million player option on the 3rd year. So that basically allows him to say, well, if I take a big jump in the next 2 years and deserve more money or can get more money, then I can opt out of that player option and do so. And I think that's an interesting thought for Kaminga. Now, I don't think Kaminga is going to be getting 105. I think Kawakami mentioned, is it 3 years, 75? I could see that as a pretty good landing point for both teams. And I think it might it certainly takes the risk away for the Warriors, because if you are indeed looking to trade him, when, he becomes trade eligible in December, like we've kind of been talking about in terms of, hey, this reunion, this offseason might be more out of convenience than it is desire, and they might look to trade him once his full salary counts in late December, January, February. If that's the case, well, it's much easier to go to another team and say, are you happy to take on Jonathan Kuminga and his contract when he's on 3 years 75 as opposed to 4 year 100 and attacking that extra year on? And obviously that limits the flexibility of the team that has Kuminga, whether that's the Warriors or the other team that might trade for him. So I think it's a really good option for both parties, because I suppose from JK's point of view, you can say, well, this is slightly disappointing. This is, he turned down a 5-year, $150 million contract. This is $75 million potentially less than what he could have got had he extended back in October. But that's the mistake he made. And I think now it might be a case of, all right, well, let's do the 2+1. Let's get the $50 million guaranteed. Let's get the $75 million guaranteed. If I want, like the player option, it's not a team option. I can lock myself into that and get that at the very worst. But I do have the option to opt out and get a bigger deal, whether it's from the Warriors, whether it's from the new team he's at that he's been traded to, whether it's someone else as a free agent. Who knows? But I think it probably gives a little bit more flexibility here that I think is probably needed in this scenario, because it's hard for the Warriors to say here's a huge, 4-year, $25 to $30 million per year contract. It's hard to do that without taking a significant risk and a significant gamble, because the facts are, like, this is a guy who, in the first round series against the Houston Rockets, it was a DNP for 4 out of 7 games. Like, for that guy to then be worth, over $100 million, like, you are taking a significant risk on that, albeit he had obviously a great finish to the playoffs in the last 4 games against the Timberwolves. And then from Kuminga's standpoint, it's like, well, I'm more talented than taking less and saying, a 4-year, $80 million contract. So let me take a shorter term deal, 2 years locked in. If I want to opt into the third, I can. I have the optionality there, but otherwise I don't have to. And so I think it makes a lot of sense, because we still want to see that extra 2 years of development and what Kaminga can be before we get a real idea of what his next contract is going to be beyond that. So I think it works well for both parties and probably does a good job of mitigating the risks. So if that's the case, if it's a 3-year 75, 3-year 80 with a 3rd-year player option, I think that's not a bad outcome for both parties. But let me know, you guys on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you guys think of that kind of structure of a deal for Jonathan Kuminga. Would you like to see more of a guaranteed 4 years? Would you like to see more or less money? Let me know. The other big thing I took away from Slater and Kawakami on the podcast was particularly this quote from Kawakami. I'll read it out and then we'll get into it. He said, I don't think it's going to be a stretch 5 now in relation to potential off-season targets. I don't think it's going to be Brook Lopez. I think they're going to try to lean on Quinten Post. That's really interesting to me, because the entire offseason I've been thinking, and Shams reported it just after the Warriors were eliminated at the hands of the Timberwolves, that, hey, they could be, what did he say? Something like a defensive playmaking wing or something like that, or a center, or a new center. And I think we've looked at this and thought, well, Steve came out, said he doesn't want to start Draymond at the 5 at the beginning of next season. He'll be going back to his customary power forward role, you'd imagine, and therefore they need a center. And I thought to myself, well, Quinten Post, his skill set is a stretch 5. He shot 41% or 40.8% during the regular season from 3-point range. Absolute sniper. But does he have the experience to, for a championship or a team that wants to be in championship contention, who's building around Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond? Like, is he fitting the bill there? Is he filling that void of a starting center spot, again, with the lack of experience, given some of the limitations and issues we saw in the playoffs? Probably not. Obviously, we know Trace started the last couple of games, but I don't think he's an option just because of limited spacing. And then obviously Loon, we'll talk about it a little bit later. He's, up in the air as an unrestricted free agent. So I looked at this and thought, and as many people would have, and thought, okay, well, they're going to be in the market for a new starting center potentially. Talked about heaps of names, but it sounds like that might all be wasted, because they might not actually be going after a stretch 5 at all, or a starting center at all. Now, I think there still could be a possibility that they do, but still, it's very interesting to hear Kawakami and Slater basically back that up. And Slater said, they've got real belief in Quinten Post. They think he's a legit 7-foot sniper, and that's great. That's fine. But can he hold up on the defensive end? Can he hold up in terms of being a strong rebounder? They are going to be the things that are going to be real issues going into next season. And the other thing was, Slater mentioned how, well, they don't want to invest too much on the center position because they know they're just going to be closing games with Draymond anyway. I kind of heard that and I was like, well, yeah, like I get it. Like their best lineups generally have Draymond at the 5 to close games. That's great, but it doesn't hurt you to go out and get some flexibility, some versatility with another option. Like if you brought someone in, like it'd be nice to say, well, that guy can start for us and he could potentially close for us. And let's not lock ourselves into Draymond being the small ball 5 to close games. Like why would you lock yourself into that? You want to have multiple options, don't you, to go to at the end of games, depending on the opponent, depending on how the game's flowing. Who knows if Draymond's going to be in foul trouble or not late in games. Like that's a very closed off view to have, that a 35 next season, he's going to be turning 36-year-old Draymond Green. He's just going to be the closing 5 for you every night. Like, no, I don't think that should be the case. And maybe they think Quinten Post can close games for you potentially, but I still think that's going to take a pretty big development here, especially in regard to the defensive side of the ball, with his ability to hold up on the interior and his ability to be a strong rebounder. I just think it's a significant leap of faith. It's a significant risk that they are taking in Quinten Post, and I love what he did in his rookie season, and I think he's going to have a long career in the league. Whether that's as a starter, we'll wait and see. Like the idea of it is fine. Like the idea of this guy who shoots 40% from 3-point range, is 7 foot tall, fantastic. That's why he's so impressive in his rookie year. But again, it's a guy who shot less than 40% from the field in the playoffs, who we kind of saw his weaknesses lay bare a little bit, particularly against, veteran bigger guys like Steven Adams in the first round and whatever else. The shooting, once teams kind of cottoned on to, oh no, this guy will actually make us pay, let's close out and focus a little bit more attention on him. He shot 31.3% from 3 in the playoffs. I don't know. Do you want to go into next season with Quinten Post as your starting center? I would just like another more proven option. And then if Quinten Post wins that role over that said player, like if you brought in Brook Lopez and all of a sudden in training camp, Quinten Post is clearly a better player, then fine. Like start Quinten Post. But I don't know, just going immediately to him and say he's our starting center for next season, I just think that's a big risk to take, and one that I think that a franchise looking to make another deep playoff run, who's built around 35-plus-year-old guys, that's not necessarily a risk they should be willing to take, particularly when, like you're talking about, if they bring Kuminga back, well, that's another young player, another 22-year-old who you are going to be playing 25, 30 minutes a game. And then if you've got Kuminga, you've got Quinten Post, you've got Pods playing probably 25, 30-plus minutes. Like, all of a sudden, you reinvesting in all these young guys, which is fine, but I would like to have some other options available. And again, if you're going to be playing Pods and Kaminga heavy, then maybe you need another veteran at that 5 spot. I don't know, but clearly the Warriors historically haven't been a team that want to spend big on the center position. That's for sure. But I still think there might be options available to them in terms of free agents, or maybe trade opportunities at contract numbers that are less than $15 million a season, where you're not going. I'm not saying you got to go out and trade for Kristaps Porzingis, who's making 30 on an expiring contract. Obviously, we've talked about that a little bit. I'm not saying you have to go out and do that, but I still think they need another option here somewhere. So let me know what your thoughts are. One of those options, though, it's kind of funny, they mentioned on the Warriors Plus Minus podcast that they wouldn't be going after a stretch 5, but Jake Fisher of the Stein Line, NBA Insider, was talking on his, or not talking, but writing on the Stein Line yesterday, that the Warriors are a team to monitor when it comes to Bobby Portis. Obviously, we've been talking about Lopez a whole heap, but it could actually be another Bucks big man that Golden State show interest in. And Fisher mentioned the ties between Bobby Portis and Steve Kerr from their days together on the 2023 Team USA squad. So that's an interesting one, because we have heard Bobby Portis' name previously in regard to the Warriors. So this is not necessarily new. Look, he's got a player option for next season. I think it's between $13-14 million that if he opts out of, he can become an unrestricted free agent. I don't see how the Warriors can possibly sign Bobby Portis unless Kuminga goes. Like, if Kuminga walks, then sure, they'd open up enough room to have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception or whatever. But even then, is that enough for Bobby Portis? I don't know, probably not. They've got this Kyle Anderson trade exception, but I don't think they can add salaries to that. So I don't actually really see how you could sign Bobby Portis in free agency, assuming that he wants at least what his player option would be. Like, maybe he just wants the longer term deal and he says, okay, well, I'm making between 13, 14, just give me 15, but on a 4-year give me like 3 years 45 or 4 years 60 or something like that. I don't know, but I don't know how the Warriors could possibly offer that. So I think if you're looking at Portis, it's probably a sign and trade scenario, like a Moses Moody or something like that, and a smaller contract or two possibly. Look, in terms of Bobby Portis as a player, I don't hate him. I just don't think it's a huge difference-making piece by any means. He's an incredibly consistent player in terms of just the numbers he's put up over the last 4 seasons. He's basically, I think, the minimum he's put up over the last 4 seasons is like 13.8 points and 7.4 rebounds or whatever. He's a 38.3% career three-point shooter, including a career high 40.7%, I think it was last season. So he basically, like, the Warriors need a jolt offensively. I think that's for sure. And he would provide that to a degree. He's also not a starting center for you. So he'd be coming off the bench. He'd be a backup big. Does that mean you're starting Post and then having Portis as kind of your smaller ball option off the bench? Like, I don't know, maybe. Potentially, I suppose, could he close games alongside Draymond? Maybe, like, he's a decent rebounder. There's defensive concerns, obviously, but maybe they'd be mitigated with Draymond. So I don't hate it. I don't hate it. It's not a huge difference-making piece, I don't think. But again, I could see why they're interested. It does fit the bill of, okay, 6'10" guy, can space the floor for you. Has a little bit more than that in terms of offensive skill. Like, if you want to go to him for a post-up, you can. Like, he'll hit a mid-range shot or two. Like, there's a bit of versatility there. Again, decent rebounder, questionable defensively, but maybe the Warriors could hide that a little bit. I think I do know, like, they were the best defense in the league after the Jimmy Butler trade, and they finished the regular season 17th in offensive rating or whatever. So that's what they're going to have to look for offense this offseason. I think Bobby Portis, again, fits the bill a little bit. I don't know how they do it in free agency as an outright signing. I just don't think that's possible, and therefore it's going to have to be, well, what do you give up? Do you give up Moses Moody for Bobby Portis? Don't know. Let me know in the comments. Let me know. Last couple of things I wanted to get onto here, talking about the big man situation. Anthony Irwin, insider for the Lakers, said that Lakers could also target Cavon Looney using their taxpayer mid-level exception, but also notes that Looney would likely remain with Golden State were they to make him the same offer. And it got me thinking, well, would the Warriors make the same offer? Like, if Loon just came to Mike Dunleavy, or Loon's camp agent, whatever, came to Mike Dunleavy and said, hey, we've got this taxpayer mid-level exception deal from the Lakers. Can you match it? We'll just come back. I think Mike Dunleavy would be like, we love you, but you might have to go. You might have to take that deal from the Lakers. I'd find it difficult that the Warriors would offer Kevon Looney more than the minimum this offseason. I'd be surprised. Now, if they offer him more than the minimum, it really, like, he must be a huge culture, locker room guy, because I'm not sure from a playing standpoint how you could offer the minimum. You've got TJD and Quinten Post as backup bigs on basically making just over $4 million combined. And that can kind of, like, I'm comfortable going into next season with Quinten Post and Trace Jackson-Davis as backup bigs, right? As guys that you want to play like 15, 20 minutes combined, right, off the bench throughout the course of a regular season. I'm okay with that. Again, I have a few more issues with betting on Quinten Post as a starting center. Absolutely. I just spoke about that. But in terms of a backup big, Quinten Post, Trace Jackson-Davis, maybe only one of them play, depending on who impresses more in training camp. Maybe it's probably going to be Post because of his three-point shooting at this point. But I'm okay with that. And so I don't think anyone's pointing to Cavon Looney and thinking you can be a starter next season. I don't think that's the case because, again, with the spacing next to Draymond, clearly it's proven doesn't work anymore in today's NBA. So, therefore, Loon is also a backup big. And so what, you're going to bring in a third backup big on more than the minimum, making like $5-6 million, which I know is not a lot. But, again, when you're pushing tax aprons and stuff like that, that's significant. Why would you do that? Why would you bring in a third string big on $5-6 million? You just wouldn't. You just wouldn't do that. Like, it'd be, if he wants to come back as a third string big, you'd only spend the minimum on that, regardless of whether it's Loon or someone else. Now, again, if it's someone you think can be a starting center for you, then sure, you can spend more than that. You can spend the taxpayer mid-level exception. You can spend a little bit more, fine. But again, I think they're pretty comfortable with TJD and Quinten Post as backup bigs who can log 20 to 25 minutes a game combined kind of thing, probably maybe less than that, 15 to 20. Then you've got a starting center potentially. Then you've got Draymond who might play small ball for 10, 15 minutes. Like, I think they're pretty well covered there in terms of backup bigs. And I don't see Loon as a starter. So I just don't know, like, if the Lakers offered him that, I think the Warriors might say, okay, well, we might want to bring you back on a minimum, but we're not going to offer you any more than that. As much as we love what he's done for the franchise over the last decade. Last thing before I finish off here as well, just to note, the Warriors announced yesterday that Brandon Podziemski had undergone successful surgery to repair a core muscle injury, which of course he suffered back in late December, missed 12 games with that initial injury. Quite crazy now that he has played out the season and has since had 2 surgeries. He had a wrist surgery. Now he's had a core abdominal surgery or whatever else. And so, again, like, I'm always the belief, like, if you're out there, you're fully fit, there's no excuses. And there's no excuses, but I do think, like, it was quite impressive that Pods took a leap, bounced back over the second half of the season, averaged over 14 points a game, shot over 40% from three over basically from the time he came back, which I think was January 23, from the time he came back from that core injury to the end of the regular season. It was very, very impressive. Had career high against the Jazz. We remember that game. He went 8 of 10 3-point shooting against the Lakers. Like, did all this great stuff, took a leap, and was doing that while evidently still these injuries were lingering to the point where he's now had to subsequently have off-season surgery. So it makes me feel a little bit more optimistic potentially about what Pods could do next season if we're looking at it and saying, well, he took this leap, he took another jump, showed more development over the second half of the season, and did that while battling through some injury concerns. So, again, hopefully he can get fully healthy, have a big training camp, and come into the next season really ready to take that next step that the Warriors are going to need for him to take to be competitive and looking to guarantee a playoff spot again in a very tough Western Conference. I'm going to finish it up there, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode. If you've got any thoughts on what I've said, then please let me know in the YouTube comments, whether that's on JK, Quinten Post as a potential starter, interest in Bobby Portis, Lakers interest in Looney, Pod's injury, whatever it may be. The finals, obviously, that's currently ongoing. Your support is very much appreciated. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Other than that, I'll see you on the next episode, potentially later on in the weekend or early next week. Thanks, guys.